All right, boys. So obviously there's a bit of story time that we need to go through of how the weekend went for all of us. Um, obviously with the potty, we want to make sure that we still give back to everyone and we kind of educate them along the way. So we'll do a bit of story time at the start, and then we'll jump into some questions or maybe talk about some lessons learned for you, Scotty, for us and our team that we experienced over the weekend. And then also too, we'll talk about like the shows that are coming up because there's a big show coming up over the weekend. Actually, across a lot of states, there's actually a lot of big shows, and there's a lot of back-to-back shows. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that too. But obviously, over the weekend, a lot of wins for all of us over the weekend. I think the biggest win would have to be Collingwood winning the grand final. Don't you reckon, MG?
Man, what a weekend it was. It was
What a game it was.
Yeah, man. As a supporter, it was maybe a little bit too stressful, but that's kind of what was justified based on how we've won on so many of our games this season. Actually, even last season too. But you certainly don't get used to it. Winning by less than a kick. It always feels like you're never going to get over the line. And you guys know I got a heart condition. It wasn't holding up too well.
But honestly, the biggest win was Scotty, for sure. We want to hear all about it. We haven't had time to literally catch up. So we're going to be experiencing it like everyone else is going to be experiencing, because it's the first time we're going to listen to your whole story about how everything went. And then we're going to tell you our experience of us following you and supporting you, because we were at Ballarat for that day, right? So
Yeah.
really, really good vibe. So I want you to just tell us, maybe you want to talk us through the process leading up the last couple of days into the show, any kind of troubleshooting you needed to do or how things went. And then let's talk a little bit about the show day, and then we'll go from there. Because again, try to give some lessons learned. Let's try to educate people along the way.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, firstly, it was such an overwhelming just weekend, couple of days, and there's still a few people as well. Firstly, I just want to say thank you everyone that reached out and supported. Even the amount of people at the actual show that came up and spoke to me, a few podcast people, a couple of your athletes as well, MT, who were there. And there were a few people in the crowd. And then even afterwards, when I trained at World Gym, Stafford, after I was getting the tan off, having a shower, there were these two guys that were there. And they're like, we were at the IFBB show. We saw you compete. We listened to the podcast. I think it was Tyson and Kane, maybe. So even just random stuff like that, I was like, oh, the boys aren't here. They would have loved that. So anyway, so to set the tone, so I started pushing in more carbohydrate Thursday. So that was day one of pushing in more carbs. The first day was meant to be a little bit more relaxed. Jenny was pretty busy with work, and so I was pretty hands-on with the kids, and I didn't get to do any sitting down. I think I did like 17,000 steps or something. And I just know, when you've had a refeed, but you just know you don't feel full, like you're not taking it in. And I woke up next morning and I was low, and I'm like, okay, that's not good. And then equally, things were a lot more full on with the kids and having to drop them off at my parents, and I was behind getting all my food in. And this is the thing, I think, as a parent, like your kids are always first, so still trying to prioritize their needs and make sure they're good. But equally, as an athlete, I was aware that this is not the optimal approach. I was meant to be chilling out, horizontal, and it was the complete opposite. When I was meant to train on the Friday, it didn't happen. I actually caught up with you boys. You guys came over and surprised me with a TMG t-shirt, which was awesome, in a little care package with some rice flour and monsters. And I mean, when you guys came over, did I seem like I was stressed or not?
Yep.
But I'm not typically someone that's messing around, but I just probably wasn't as chilled as maybe you thought I was going to be.
No, I mean, I'd spoken to you, so I knew that you felt like you were behind schedule, and that's why, I definitely wanted you to feel like we didn't want to hold up any of your time. But like for you, and as like you were still chilled, calm, and collected, and you still conducted yourself like an absolute champion. But as one of your best mates, I could tell that the stress was creeping up a little bit. And it's totally understandable when you feel like you're running behind such a tight schedule, it starts to feel a little bit overwhelming and stressful. So you had every right to feel that way.
Yeah, and I think just knowing as well that the carbs that went in the day before hadn't stuck, and equally expenditure was higher than it should have been. And I just felt like low. Perception of energy availability was low. Anyway, I saw you guys, and that it actually made a big difference. Even Jen said afterwards, she was like, "I'm so glad the boys came over to see you. You look like you just feel a bit better now." So she's like, "Let's just eat your meal. Let's go train." So we went into the gym, but I knew within like 20 minutes that I probably wasn't in a good spot because I couldn't get a pump. And after about 45 minutes to an hour, I finally had a bit of a pump. We did some posing. But equally, because I was pushing, I'm like, it's going to come, it's going to come. I was just chewing through more glycogen and carbohydrates. So that was deleterious to where I needed to be. So I think the plan was, I had it here. So I was meant to be having 750 grams of carbs on the Saturday, and I just brought up my MFP. I ended up having just under 1,000 grams of carbohydrate, and I pushed in a lot of fat. And I woke up the next morning with a new all-time low, and I was like, fuck, that's not good. And we were up early because we had to fly early. So my weight on that morning was 82.35. So I was super, super sucked down. I still had all the meals that I was going to have, but I just pushed in more fat, more rice flour in my cream of rice. We took all our food, we flew, we got up there, and then when we got there, the car company that were meant to pick us up were like, "Yeah, we're 5 minutes away." My tanning appointment was at 11:30, and I had to register at 11:30. We didn't get picked up till about 10 past 11, so I didn't get to World Gym Underwood or whatever it was called to register till about maybe 12. Registered, had to sit in line for over an hour. I was standing in line to register. And then all the tanning's done by Protan, but it's out the back. So picture like a massive, like all the World Gyms, the warehouse is huge. It's 30 degrees, the sun's blaring. There was only 2 tanners on that day. And as we walked around, there was just a line that looked like it was never ending. And then I was like, fuck. And then we basically just sat in line for about, well, not sat, we stood in line in the sun for like 2.5 hours. Finally went around. I had to get 2 coats because I hadn't had a tan from the day before. I had my food, which was good because Jen was heating up my food and bringing it to me. But equally, I'm just standing, and I don't know anyone to take my place in the line, and then I'll come back and everyone else is waiting. So you just got to do your fucking time and wait. So we did that and then dried off. And by that stage, it was like 3-something o'clock. And I was like, fuck, we got to go and get food. I chewed up the meals that I'd pre-planned to already have by waiting in the line. So then we went and got all of our food, caught the last sort of 15 minutes of the footy, and I just tried to relax, pushed in more food, and I could feel everything sort of starting to stick a little bit more, but I wasn't fully topped up. And then we made the decision not to waste time going to do a GT session at Stafford, because I'm like, the risk for reward, spending more energy, and then potentially missing out on a window to be able to eat. I'm better off just sitting here. I'll just do a light pump up from here, and I'll just continue to just eat throughout the night, which we did. And then I ended up pushing, it was about...
So
Sorry,
on
go.
that, Scotty, because you didn't train, what did you do in replacement to make sure that food was going where it needed to go?
So I had my dumbbells with me. And so just to aid digestion, we walked to go to the supermarket, which was like a 10-minute walk. It was a flat surface. So at least, because I was pushing in just under 4,000 calories. I wanted to make sure that I could digest it, which I was. And then I just did, with my dumbbells and bands, I just treated it like it was show day. So I spent maybe 20 minutes just getting a bit of a pump, and I did it at about 8:30 at night to just see where I was at. And I had started to feel that quite a lot. I was super vascular and I was good, but equally in the back of my mind, I was still probably a little bit more stressed than I wanted to be, because I knew that I was like chasing where I needed to be. And then I woke up that morning and I was probably flatter than, I was the fullest that I'd been. Didn't have my scale weight with me to check my scales to check, but I was not as full because I wanted to wake up almost spilled, because I knew that then I wouldn't have to stress about having to eat too much and I could just pump up harder. And so we had to be at the venue at the Sleeman Center at 6:30 for the code of tan. So I was up at about 10 to 4, started to get some food in. And then I brought my meals with me to take there. And then when we got to the venue to tan, we got there about 6:35, again, walked upstairs, and there was a never-ending line. There was guys in classic, there were bodybuilder guys there who went on to like ages, but it's first in, best dress. So my division,
Men's physique is first. Men's physique's first.
very
Okay.
first off the rank.
Wow.
And so I got a spot downstairs because I'm like, I want to make sure that I've got a bag, I'm set up and I'm ready. And then I'm like, I'll go upstairs, a bit naive, probably thinking like, there's not going to be many people here because we're first. So all the men's physique guys will be first. But I went up the stairs and I was like, fucking hell. And there's just a line like this to get tanned. And I was like, fuck. And there's more people walking behind me. And I'm like, do I go down and get my meals or do I get my fucking spot? Because I'm stressing thinking I might not actually have time to get my tan. And I need to get tanned again because I'm behind because everyone else has had 3 coats. And so I just took my spot in the line, finally got my tan on. And then I got downstairs and I quickly realized that the athlete meeting, I missed it and I had to get ready. And he was like, all right, in 15 minutes, I'm taking this class, this class, this class. It's not like ICM where they take one at a time. They took 5.
Okay.
So the masters division, some other division, and then all of the true novice and then the novice. So you just have to go. And you know where the Sleeman Center is. So you know that pump up area. So everyone goes to there. And once you're there, you're not allowed to leave. So I just quickly got my boardies on, put my number on, had everything was like pre-made. So I'm like, I'm not going to have time to eat this meal. And equally, I don't know if I'll be able to digest it. It was like 120 grams of carbs with 40 grams of fat. It was meant to go in at like 7:30.
Wow.
So I'm like, I'll just grab the rice cakes that I had and my pre-workout and I'll just go. And so that was at about 9:30. And then they've got all the lines set up. Like if you're in any kind of line queuing up to go on a ride or at an airport. And so once you go into your like lane, you're not allowed to leave. And there's a big scary guy with a clipboard who's like, no one's fucking leaving. Once you're in, you don't leave this line. And so everyone's just pumping up.
Can you pump up in that line? Can you pump up?
Yeah, but you're not allowed to have dumbbells. You're only allowed to have bands.
Okay.
So I wasn't marshaled into those lines for the first probably 20 minutes. So in my head, I'm like, can't bring dumbbells in there. I need to fucking pump up as hard as I can because they're like, we're getting ready to go on. We're getting ready to go on. And being mindful that I needed to make sure that I could pump up properly because even then with the bands, there's only so much you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pumping up like crazy. Got a pump, was good. But then you get into the line and we were waiting in those like marshaled lines for probably maybe 40 minutes. And so because I was pumping up so early and so hard, making sure that I was not getting on there flat, again, my body was just chewing through everything. So my first division, I got on there and I was pretty happy with the look and I had a really good pump. I was vascular and I felt full. But then as soon as you get off, because there was 19 in my division, so there's heaps of athletes, you go back around, do a circle, and then you do your individual routine, and then you have to wait. And then if you're in the first call outs, which I was obviously fortunate enough to be in the first call outs, and I was in the center, and I had a feeling that I was maybe I was going to be in the top 5. They let you know backstage, these are the top 3. You have to wait to the side while the other division before you is finishing off. So I was waiting to the side, and you can't go and get food. You can't. Like I'm doing push-ups on one of the poles there, just trying to squeeze everything that I can. And then we did the first division. And that was such an incredible experience because you just like the butterflies in your stomach. Firstly, I was ecstatic because I'm like, I'm in the top 3. There's 19 in my class. If I was going to be in the first call outs, I was wrapped. So to know that I was in the top 3 and equally the guys there, I don't know if you could tell on the feed, they were enormous. Some of the guys backstage were just like, I was trying not to compare myself to them, but they were just big, big, big boys. And so the vibe was really good. The top 3 that I was with, I'd actually been speaking to through socials and also just backstage, really good blokes. Everyone's super friendly. And we were all just ecstatic that we were in the top 3 and we lined up and they called out Ash 3rd and then it's Mitch and I 2nd. And I'm like, fucking hell, I'm in the top 2. And they called out Mitch and it was almost like this sinking feeling like, oh my God, I just won my class and I was almost like baffled. And then, yeah, Tony read out my name and the only person I could hear in the crowd was Jen, because she does this, woo, woo, Scotty. And I could I can't see her, but I could hear her voice like amongst all the black. And yeah, it was just such an incredible experience. But then as soon as it was done, like I'm thinking, sweet, I'm going to go and just let this marinate. I'll put my medal down. I'll get a drink. I'll eat that other rice cake. The marshal guy, I went to walk out. I literally picked up my Maximus sports drink to have a sip, and he goes, Scotty, get in fucking line. And I'm like, fucking hell. And this guy's super scary. So I'm like, all right, put my medal down. The drink was literally like that. I was about to sip it, and I literally just dropped it on the ground. Half of it probably spilt everywhere. Ran back in, but then we were just waiting there for another 10 minutes to pump up before we go back out. And and so then we had the next division, and I had a feeling that I was going to be able to go all right, because most of those guys were in there except for this one Asian guy who I was tanning next to yesterday. And I remember after tanning with him thinking, fucking hell, these open guys are huge. And then he walks in with board shorts. And I was saying to Ashton, I'm like, he's not in this fucking lineup, is he? Surely not. And he looked at me the same, thinking like, oh my God, like this guy is like, I thought he was an open bodybuilder.
Enormous.
He was enormous. Really nice guy, Bo. Congrats to him. He looked incredible. And so we went out, and I'm thinking, like, there's no way this guy is going to obviously smoke everyone. They look at everyone, they line us all up, they moved everyone around. And typically with IFBB, if you're in the middle, that's usually who they have as like first. To the right of that person is normally second, then third. And that's sort of how they do it. And so they moved everyone around, and then they kept me in the middle, and I was like, fucking hell, what's going on here? This is after the first division, which we were on stage for about 20 minutes. They just worked us so hard. And so we went through a few rounds, and I was still in the middle, and then they eventually swapped Bo and I. So he's the Asian guy who won that and then won the Open. And yeah, so I came second in that. And then the Open class, exactly the same. There was another couple of guys there that were in the Open that weren't in the other classes. But it was Bo who came first. I was second, and Mitch who placed third. So, and even when Tony had her arms up and they lifted his arm, all I could just see was this enormous lat just like towering over me. It was ridiculous.
So obviously first in true novice, second in novice, second in open. Is that right?
Yeah.
Who won the overall?
The guy who's won it, I actually thought, I was really surprised that Bo didn't win it. I forget his name. I was speaking to him on Instagram yesterday, but he's won it. He's the guy who won the overall. Has come second at nationals for the overall.
Surab.
I think 3 or maybe 4 times.
Okay.
So he's missed out on his pro card a few times. So, and he looks like he's just built out of stone. Equally, Bo does as well, but he was just a bit sharper. But
look sharp as.
Yeah, just
right.
So dense, super
man.
sharp.
So,
but it was crazy. But then afterwards, I was absolutely ecstatic, and I did. Tony Doherty came and spoke to me afterwards and was just saying, he was giving me a lot of praise and just saying, I want to see you at the nationals. And I'm in my head, I'm like, there's no way that I would ever be able to contend with these guys. And he's like, it was super, super close, and I got some really good positive feedback. That I was actually I was in the mix, but I just got out muscled, which was really, really surprising. But I was happy that I was able to bring some pretty decent conditioning, and I think that was probably what held me in good stead. But I think there's, as I was saying to Jenny last night, there's that part of me of just knowing, I know I could have been fuller. Like, had I had my time over again, I obviously would have topped up a lot more the few days prior. But equally, just that morning, I probably would have pushed food so much harder, and I would have just said, fuck it. I would have brought my Tupperware containers up with me and stood in the line with my food to try and bring that fullness. But regardless, like, as a first time competitor with IFBB, to be able to go in as a natural and, be able to, hold my own, reasonably okay was super pleasing.
So like, that's obviously the biggest thing, like being a natty in a contest which you've got untested guys that are definitely going to out-muscle you.
There was actually one other natty. He's an ICM pro as well, Michael. He was there. He was in the open with me as well. So he was a natty as well, and another men's ICN physique pro. So I think we were the only two. But you can tell the difference, man, when you see these guys.
So I guess what I want to know is, did anyone know that you're natty? Did anyone say anything about it? Did anyone say, man, you did really well considering, that? That's what I really, really want to know about, because, you have a lot of also bikini girls. Some of them are natural, some of them aren't. So, and normally you can, they get a fair bit of praise too. So I wonder, did anyone ever comment on it or say anything to you?
Yeah, there were a few. There was a couple who, when they were talking about their pharmacology in the week and how it was, who were like, man, everyone's open. Like, and I'm like, no, man, look at my Instagram. Like, I compete as an ICM pro. I've never compete. Like, I obviously have an enormous amount of respect for those that are assisted. But I'm not. I'm just competing as a natural. But equally, I think they could probably tell because although I don't think I was bullied for size, but a lot of these guys were bigger. Like at the weigh-ins, my weigh-in was, I think I weighed in at just over 84.6 or something like that. 84.8 at the weigh-ins was my weight. But like when I spoke to Bo, he weighed in at 96 point something. So he had 12 kilos. Granted, he was bigger than everyone, but most of the guys around my height were probably maybe 3 to 5 kilos bigger. But I think conditioning was probably something that helped, and also just maybe symmetry and some balance. But yeah, those that did that I had that conversation with were like, man, that's incredible. And then it sort of transitions to, have you thought about crossing over? Like, look what you've been able to do as a natural. Like you could take that next step. But equally, like I sort of was saying, respect fully, of course. But I'm at a stage in my life like where for me it's the experience and the challenge. But equally, I want to be around to make sure that I can see my kids grow up and all that sort of stuff. And with that pharmacology and using compounds like that, there's definitely an element of risk. And for me, the risk to reward just doesn't warrant going down that path. Again, I have an enormous respect for those guys that do it and what they're able to take their physique to. But equally, I think even the weekend's probably proof that you can still be competitive as a natural if you work hard and you're willing to, pay the rent, so to speak, across all the other variables that, and it just comes down to just sometimes you just got to work I guess a little bit harder. But yeah, that everyone was like really, really friendly. I was really surprised that the experience as an athlete with the other athletes was the most enjoyable that I've ever had.
That's awesome.
Like the camaraderie around everyone. It wasn't, because, sometimes at comps where it's a bit like everyone's super tense and standoffish, don't want to look at that person, don't pump up near that person there.
I actually want to talk about that in a second after we tell you our experience, because I'm noticing some changes too about Backstage. So I want to bring that up in a second. But so any lessons learnt? Do you think you'll ever do it again, IFBB? Will you maybe do a state show for not having to travel, etc.? What do you think?
Well, see, this is the thing. So afterwards, part of the conversation I had with Tony, he was saying, I want to see you at Nationals. Make sure you're at Nationals, which is in a couple of weeks' time. And that kind of has been the feedback / recommendation that I have had. Where we were talking about it last night, kind of tossing up, because that coincides with the same night that I meant to do the ICN Pro Show.
Okay, so ICN Nationals is the same day as IFBB Nationals.
Yeah, the Pro Show for ICN for physique is on the Saturday night, and Nationals is in Brisbane on the Saturday for men's physique. So yeah, so we haven't really fully decided. So we're just going to see what happens over the next week and then make the decision, because we fly out overseas the next day as well. So logistically, it's a bit trickier. But I'm definitely considering doing that. And equally, I definitely would compete with men's physique again. Like having that taste of it with IFBB kind of pushes me to, again, want to be better. And I think this whole prep, part of the reason that that I've been able to maybe take my physique to another level is knowing that I'm standing up against, the best of the best. That show is huge. I think Tony was saying that it was bigger than the Arnolds they had. It's the biggest IFBB show that they've had here. So knowing that caliber and quality of people there, it just pushes you to go to that, I guess that next level. So it's only probably motivated me and pushing me to go even harder and level up even more.
The thing is too, is also you are doing an ICM Pro show, but it's going to be in Italy. So
yeah, and that's the other thing as well, knowing that I have that experience, that I can do that over there. And most of the pros over here I've competed against before, whereas Europe, there's a whole heap that I won't even know. And from what I understand, it's pretty big. It's pretty big over there. So it could be an opportunity to be able to have that. And again, as you guys know, I'm not chasing medals. Like, to have that experience and test myself against the best is something that really drives me and motivates me. So I'll obviously speak to you boys about it. Get the all clear from Jen as well. But yeah.
So obviously we weren't there. It was absolutely spewing, but we had to be at Ballarat at the ICN show, which is definitely a great show, and we'll talk about that in a second. But obviously we were cheering you on from a distance. And the way it went down is MG had some clients on in Classic. So he was pumping up side stage, looking at them on stage. I was helped pumping up his men's physique guys. And while we're pumping up, I looked at the time, I said to Amy, the coach that works with MG, I said, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you just jump on Instagram for 1 sec, go onto IFBB and see what the live stream's up to? She clicked on it. You were on. You were literally walking on as a first call out. And I was like, oh my God, Scotty's on. So like everyone around stopped. And I took a photo of it and I think I posted it.
Yeah, I saw.
And we're just watching this little phone, just watching you. And we all had the biggest smile because we saw they move you around, put you in the middle. We're like, oh my God, he's in the middle. This is so good. And then you walked off. And the first thing I just saw MG, I was like, oh my God, Scotty was in first call out. He was in the middle. This is absolutely amazing. I ran up to Matty Orchard, told him, ran up to Tom Rodriguez, told him. We're all just so amazed by it all. And we're just so happy. And then we kept pumping up and doing what we needed to do for the clients. And then we got the news that you won. And imagine backstage, right? It's like in a little corner backstage, people are pumping up doing anything, and you just see all the people start cheering, like, yeah, Scotty won, Scotty. And people just look at us like, what the hell? Why are people cheering backstage? Like, what are these guys on about? And we were so happy. Like, everyone was hugging, we're cheering, people were coming up to us. Maddie was like, oh my God, I got to message him. Even James from Coach Collective, he was like, oh my God, Scotty won. We were just so happy for you, bro. Like, nearly like little tears. Like, we're just so happy, and we just could not believe it. We're just telling everyone that knew you what happened. And it just absolutely lifted our spirits while we were there. We were so happy for you. And then obviously we found out that you went into the other divisions and you got second, and we thought it was absolutely amazing. And it was really a talking point of the day. We just kept going, oh my God, did you see Scotty? Scotty won. Did you see? So yeah, it was. We were so happy for you, bro. We were so happy for you. Yeah.
No, that's
MG. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, there was a little eruption backstage. It was like literally like there was a moment of like, it was like a little football game, man, backstage when the news came. And then I think we were trying to get on the phone to you. I think James had.
Well, I saw him. So Michael.
Yeah, so we had him on FaceTime. We were trying to get you. James.
He was there. That's why I saw James. He was at the ICN event, and I was almost going to say, go and find the boys. Like,
well, James was trying to organise it. He found Michael, but I think Michael was just too hard to hear. But we were trying to get you, but it was pretty awesome. And then, the Ballarat show was awesome. We had heaps of people who knew the podcast of that show, probably the most that have ever come up and introduced to me. And the first thing everyone said to me was like, hey, so nice to meet you. Oh my God, can you believe it? Scotty won, Scotty. So like people that were listening were watching it too. It was so freaking awesome, man. So. And people showed me shots of you and bringing up little shots that they've taken from their screenshot, and it was so cool, man.
So good, man. And that's what I want to talk about too, like backstage. I don't know. I want to get your boys' feedback on this. I've noticed maybe in the last year and a bit is a little bit of a change backstage. I think it was like what you said, Scotty. Like, people used to stick to themselves. People used to be a little bit funny about certain things. Maybe a little bit standoffish, but I don't know if it's because maybe people have gotten to know us a little bit more. They listen to the potty, so people maybe treat us a little bit differently, or maybe just in general, people are a little bit more lighthearted backstage. But I just felt like over this last year, and even a little bit of the previous year too, is I feel like backstage is almost like it's like a party. It's like you're at a party, everyone's having a good time, they're walking around doing their thing, but everyone's pretty happy. And then they're just going out on stage and performing and then coming out and everyone's just cheering for everyone's success. Obviously, you have some party poopers in the corner that don't want to talk to anyone, but I just feel like that's the vibe. It's more of a friendly, fun vibe. Everyone's having a good time and they're just there to celebrate all the hard work they've done. And sure, there's some seriousness about it. You know, you got to follow a plan. You got to pump up at a certain time. Some people are nervous as shit. So I get it, but I'm finding that backstage is just more of a positive vibe and a really, really friendly vibe. Like, you know, we're all helping pump up each other's clients. I knew that MG had to look after someone on stage, so I'd go back and check and help pump someone up. Maddie Orchard would help us too. We'd help them. One of their clients was hot. I got a towel and was fanning out one of Tommy's clients. So it was good. I felt the vibe backstage has been a little bit different to what I've experienced in previous years. What do you think, MG?
Man, 100%. I felt like it started last season. I really felt the shift last season. And then I think kicking off with the Vic A and B show, the vibe was there 100%. And I was like, well, did it feel that way because, you know, I organized that show and I had a big part in that show? Or, you know, is that shift really starting to happen? Mm-hmm. And then the Ballarat show just cemented it for me, man. I honestly felt like it was like just like a community, a group of friends. You know, I reckon I spoke to 15 to 20 different coaches that day who were all super positive and supportive and, you know, gave me really great feedback and people were happy to ask each other for advice. And, you know, I gave someone some citrulline and someone gave someone else some salt tablets and someone else helped someone with this and you were pumping someone's client. Like it had never been that way before. Mm-hmm. There's always been relationships backstage, but I feel like the community in natural bodybuilding in Victoria at the moment is the best that it's ever been. And I feel like, you know, apart from maybe a few people who still have, you know, their ego super high, the egotism in the room has dropped right down and everyone is just happy to be around good quality people. I mean, you know, even just looking at like, you know, the boys from Peak, like if I use Tommy as an example, we both had our two girls in the Open for Sports and we sat side stage and we just had our arms around each other while they were competing against each other. Like he was cheering for my client, I was cheering for his client, and we just both appreciated, you know, just how hard they both worked and the, you know, how good their physiques looked. And we were standing with Tony. So it was the two coaches who had clients in the overall with Tony, the president, just enjoying the moment. And I feel like that sort of stuff is happening more and more these days. And I'm loving it, man. I am absolutely loving it. I honestly got home that day and just felt like I had been out with, you know, my people. You know, obviously I had a lot of athletes that day who I'm close with as well. But I definitely got home feeling super, super fulfilled from the experience that show gave me.
Yeah, I think it makes a big difference to the athletes too. When they're in an environment that's a lot more positive, everyone's super friendly. It's good. Like next week, there's going to be a lot of first timers. I've got so many. They're going to be so nervous. So to have a positive vibe around them where people are super friendly, it's just going to relax everyone and make sure that everyone just enjoys the day and enjoys the experience regardless of any of the results. You know, I only had one client at that show, but one thing that she said to me really, really stood out, and I was really surprised actually. You know, she came off stage after her first or second division, first timer. She's super nervous, right? Big day for her. And she came off stage and she was really, really positive. And she said, Michael, you know, what do you think the other girl had over me? And I gave her feedback. And then she said to me, she's like, for me asking that, am I acting like a good sportsman? And I was like, for her to even think about that she's has to wonder just asking why someone beat her, whether she's being a good sport. And I was like, yeah, of course. Like you're allowed to know. You're not saying that there was anything wrong with the decision. You just want to know what you can improve on next time. And I was like, I love hearing that from the client. Like I absolutely loved it when they're like, am I being a good sportsman? I was like, because that's what it's all about. It's about encouraging other people and being positive and just having a look at what happens and be like, okay, well, what can I do better next time? And just wanting to be a good ambassadors of the sport. So I really, really encourage people if they are competing for the first time or even coming up, over these next weekends, because some big, really, really big shows, try to bring that positivity, try to bring that vibe to a show, because it's not only going to lift you up, it's going to lift everyone else up around you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about quickly some of the wins that you had, MG, over the weekend, because
Yeah, bro, you had a very, very fruitful weekend.
It was good. But like it for me, I think, I woke up on the Sunday morning after the grand final, in a great mood. And I think Meave said to me, how do you feel? Because it was early, and I don't reckon I've had a day off, man, like a genuine day off for 2-3 months, right? Like, it honestly feels that way. We've been traveling, we've had shows in every state. So I woke up pretty early to make sure that I was at the venue early, because it was a bit of a drive, and I was picking up MT and a couple of boys as well. So there was a few stops on the way. So, Meave was aware that, it was another early morning. She said, "Oh, how are you feeling?" And I think I said this to MT, and I was like, "Well, my team just won the grand final. My best mate's competing in IFBB today. I'm going to pick up my other best mate to watch my mates compete. I think I'm going pretty well." Like, I get there's a bit of lingering fatigue, but all in all, I was just super grateful from the moment that I woke up, and I think that definitely helped with the way that I approached the overall day. We did have 7 competitors from my team competing on the weekend, which is always stressful, but a lot of the stress was taken away. I had obviously Cole helping me, Amy helping me, and MT pretty much was like my second brain. There was a time I actually was watching someone on stage. It was taking a little longer, and I knew that Fran had to start getting ready for her next division. And I came backstage, I ran back, and MT was already pumping her up, and I hadn't even asked him. It was like, fucking legend. Like, I was so fortunate. So from that regard, it was an amazing day, but I had a lot of support, and I just want to thank everyone who helped me on the day. And got to see a couple of people who've been working hard for a long time finally get on stage, which was pretty special. And a lot of my competitors on the weekend, it just happened to be a show where every one of my athletes I've got a really, really, really strong bond with, which was incredible, and a lot of first timers, which was also amazing. So it was a successful day. James did very well, took out his class in physique. Matty Papa podiumed in everything. I had Scotty Fitz and Osis do classic as well, which was awesome. Both of their first shows, they both looked amazing, had a great experience, and have got some more opportunities this season to get a little bit better. And then Fran, obviously, who took out every class that she was in across both sports and fitness, which we had to make a little bit of changes from fitness to sports, just because those that saw her, she's got an incredible physique. She's dense. She had striated glutes. She's round muscle bellies everywhere. And we came in hard as hell for fitness. We were super, super vascular. I posted some videos. And then we wanted to tone that down so she took out the fitness overall, and then we really wanted to tone it down after sport. So we just completely stopped pumping up. We put a ton of fat into her, and then we changed our posing to basically not press or squeeze in, virtually all of our poses. And, we got feedback from the judge that day that he noticed that difference. So there are definitely some things that you can do. I don't know, there was a bit of like controversy on the day of people like, how can this person win that class and this person win that class when they did well in that class? And that happens sometimes, and I get it, and I get why that can be confusing to a lot of people. But ultimately, there's times when the judges just have to pick, the best of the bunch. And sometimes, there are some things in one division that do carry over to another division. And ultimately, especially in the guy divisions, it's muscularity and it's conditioning, right? It feeds across to all of them. So sometimes you can be the best in one, but just still tick the box for another. From our point of view for Fran, we knew that we were super hard for fitness, so we knew what we could do to make that look a little bit different, and that helped us win that other category, which was sports. So there are things that you can do to change your look, and ultimately, there are criteria that do cross across the both. So, and then I had Putri in bikini, her first show as well, who top 2 and top 3 in all 6 of her classes as well, which was awesome. So very, very, very productive day, and looking forward now to nationals to take a few people back with some improvements. And I think anyone who saw Fran on the day will attest to just how incredible her physique is, and she'll definitely be a contender on that national stage. So we're very much looking forward to that.
It'll be awesome, man. I can't wait. So obviously we've got a big show here in Victoria coming up this weekend. I think there's other states that also have their state show for ICN this weekend too. So obviously a massive weekend across Australia for a lot of feds and a lot of states, which we're looking forward to. Obviously, we'll be at the VIX. I know, MG, you're not going to be there this weekend.
Bob will be on Saturday.
You'll be on Saturday. You will be there Saturday. Scotty, you'll be there Saturday for the men's show.
Yep.
I'll try to make my way down also on Saturday for the men's show, but then Sunday is the big day for me. I've got 10 competitors, so
Wow.
it's going to be a bit of a big day. A lot of them first timers too, which is awesome.
That's right.
So there's that, and then the following weekend is NBA Nationals, and I know a lot of people are going back to back, and for the females especially, they've got a little bit less time because they compete on a Sunday, and then the next weekend they compete on a Saturday. So they've got less time. So I don't know, maybe Scotty, you might want to talk about how we do back-to-back weeks, even when the actual week is a little bit shorter than what we normally expect. If we traditionally do a 3-day carb up for one show, will we maybe only do a 2-day for the other show to give a little bit more time to bring the weight down? Or do we use other tactics to bring that weight down and still do the 3-day carb up? Like, what would you normally do, or what are some recommendations on how you would do a back-to-back week when you are compressed for time?
I think firstly, context is important, and assessing were you happy with what you presented on Saturday. So let's say that you've got someone who was on the money, they took an overall, then you got a recipe for success. So what you need to do now is wash everything off and then rinse and repeat. But if you've got someone who just fell short, or maybe the feedback was you need to come in sharper, then you know what you need to do, and you've got a short window to do it. So things like, do you go out and have that? Some coaches will give a green light to go out, have a meal. Maybe it's just grilled or whatever, or maybe that isn't an option this time around. Waiting until the next morning to do your training session, also maybe that's not an option. So maybe it's literally straight to the gym, wash everything off, and then obviously try and hit reset. I think putting in place, if you've tried to push sodium pretty heavily, then obviously you're going to see some disruption to electrolyte homeostasis. So pushing in more potassium to try and prevent some of that hectic edema. Because the other thing is as well, when the tan starts to come off, the look can look really shitty 2 or 3 days later, because your tan's kind of masking some of the detail. You can get a bit stressy. So you just, for me, it's always about just, getting exactly straight back to baseline as soon as you can. So training on the night of, I think, is advantageous. And then I'll usually hyperhydrate that night. Don't push in any sodium, things like banana, potassium via coconut water and things like that, and the next day as well, and reduce sodium the next day, getting them to do their cardio in the morning, and ideally doing it with lots of layers on so they're sweating more, so that, again, when we sweat, we're secreting sodium and calcium and whatnot, and then obviously hydrating and pushing some of those electrolytes back in. And usually, if you follow that approach/intervention, within 2 days, you're pretty much back to baseline. And that's something that even I experienced from Brisbane. We had to get on a flight that night. I went straight from the show to Stafford, trained, showered. I had about 5 liters of fluid, coconut water, trained first thing the next morning, and then woke up at the all-time prep low that I was yesterday. So it's like, it doesn't take long if you do those things back to normal. But equally, I think sometimes you can even use it as an opportunity to, rather than if you're having to deplete, you can just assess where the look is at, and then maybe just gradually feed into the week. Because I think too many people get caught up in, you've got to do a depletion and a carb up. At the end of the day, the goal of peaking is you want to make sure that muscle glycogen is completely saturated within one's physique. So females, depending on their size, maybe 350 grams of carbohydrate. You've got obviously liver glycogen you need to allow for. So I think if you can just slowly, maybe you pull them down over Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, just slowly start to bring food up. So maybe it's not a traditional carb up. I've done this heaps of times before, where it might be like, say, baseline carbs for a low day were 150. Once that finishes, it might be 200 the next day. And then you might go 250, and then you might go 300. You might get to Thursday and you're like, we're starting to really fill out nicely. And then if you're on the Saturday, you might go 325 the next day, see where we're at. And then again, we use things like fats to slow down digestion, and also to fill out intramuscular triglycerides as well, because that can make a big difference, especially on guys, to their physique. So I don't know if that is too generalized. It probably is a little bit. Basically, you want to wash off the look, hit reset, and then decide if you're really happy with what you presented. For me, I think if you're already inside out conditioned, there's not really much that you need to do other than just wash off fatigue. And typically, if you try and deplete for too many days thereafter, I think the look can run away from you, and sometimes you can suck them down too low, and it's hard to bring them back to life, and you've got to keep feeding and feeding. So sometimes just a gradual linear load as the week unfolds is a lot more predictable, and it's a lot more of a conservative approach. It's not hard if you need to, the day before, if you're like, we're not really looking like we're getting a response. And it's not just how you look, it's also how are your training sessions? Are you getting a really, really good pump? And how long is that pump hanging around for?
So
Are you looking like you've got edema afterwards? Because if you do, then maybe you are spilled. So they're all pieces of data that you obviously collate along the way, but equally, as a coach, you need to be like on it every single day to just be assessing where we're at. Do we need to go forward? Do we need to pull back? And titrating intakes accordingly.
And normally, would you be looking at the body weight to come back down to baseline before they started the carb up in the previous week? So say you're doing back-to-back weeks, say you weighed 60 kilo before you started your carb up. Are you looking to get back to 60 before you start your next one?
I think it would depend on where the look is at, because sometimes, and it depends how that person responds from an edema perspective. Some people just retain shitloads of water for a few days. So I think only you as the coach would really know. And that's where it wouldn't be just on what the quantitative metrics are regarding the scale weight. I'd be looking at what were the photos like at that 60 versus we might be 60.6. But having a look at our photos, is there still a lot of detail? Is digestion there? When was their last bowel movement? How much bulk was in that bowel movement? What's the color of their urine? So things like that as well. And also factoring in things like I've spoken about the Wood rating, so your weight, the color of your urine, and then obviously your thirst when you're waking up. So if those elements on show day were like you woke up, you were dehydrated, this is where your thirst levels are at, this is your weight. Whereas if you wake up a week later and it's like your weight was down, but you're not dehydrated and all these things, it might tell you, well, maybe the week before my weight was higher because I was actually retaining a bit of water because I was dehydrated. And then when you actually start to drink some water and dilute blood plasma osmolality, you see that sort of start to attenuate itself, and the change in electrolyte levels kind of sort themselves out. So there's lots of moving parts to it, but I think the more data that you have that you can reflect and compare one versus the other, but you definitely want to obviously place emphasis on the aesthetics and where is the look. But I wouldn't be too stressed about the weight gives you a metric of assessment, but equally, I think the art of coaching and knowing your athlete and knowing when or where they need to be, you're like, we can tell. You can look at your athlete and be like, yeah, you're holding on to a bit of water. Once you have that bowel movement, it's going to go. Or you're like, nah, you look flat. So I think you can tell. It's just a matter of, and then knowing, like the art of coaching is obviously knowing where they're at and what you need to do. And then obviously there's the science and the knowledge behind knowing what levers you need to pull on and when you need to pull them.
Yeah. I think one of the things too is it's pretty common for your bowel movements to be a little bit irregular coming out of the back end of a show the next day or two, for sure.
Yeah.
With just the different type of food and the fact that, you just ate really, really weird on a show day because you do some weird things where we don't normally push in that type of food and that type of sodium and do all those weird things. So the next day, don't be surprised if your bowel movement is weird. It doesn't happen, or it takes a day or two to get back, for sure.
Or if you wake up in the middle of the night to go twice. I mean, all of those are options.
Yeah, they're all options for sure.
Yeah, but basically, I think if we set a bandwidth of around 48 to 72 hours to get back to like baseline, and then you can assess, where you're at and what you need to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be experiencing this because there's a lot of people that are doing a show this weekend and then a show next weekend too, and then potentially the weekend after if they're doing ICN Nationals. So
yeah, it's super easy. As a coach, I much prefer it because it's like we need to wash it off, and it requires a lot more communication and probably a little bit more work in the sense of checking in every single day with your clients, seeing where they're at, what you need to do. But once someone's truly stage ready, it's pretty cruisy in terms of just you need to find the look that you like, and then it's just a matter of of holding it, and equally understanding that if someone's really really conditioned, you need to be mindful of as well of protecting contractile tissue, especially like if you think about, you've had a show last weekend, if you're doing the VIX, then NBA, then ICN, you got a whole nother month of competing ahead of you. So you don't want to just spend too much time down low in the hole. You got to make sure that you're giving back to the system and hanging out at maintenance so that you don't risk degrading lean mass. Because that's something, especially on athletes that, if you're a fitness competitor, or if you're a men's physique or any men's competitors, you don't want to risk giving up tissue.
Yeah, for sure. All right, boys. I think we'll wrap it up. It was good catching up, Scotty. I think we'll catch up again soon. But yeah, again, congratulations on an absolutely amazing, successful weekend that you had.
Thanks, boys. I appreciate your support.
Brother.
Keen to see you you're doing NBA, right? NBA. Keen to see you on that pro stage there at NBA.
And then you boys will be potty without me next week because I fly out on Sunday.
Yeah, Maldives.
MG's off to the Maldives for a week. So yes, next week's potty will be without MG.
I thought you might have just dialed in with like some scuba gear or something. Like, how cool would that have been? MG with snorkel.
Well, it is just because it is a working holiday as well. So me and I are running a retreat there. So we're not just going to chill. There will be some chilling, no doubt about it. But yeah, we are running a retreat. So I might be running classes and stuff like that. And it's just going to be a little bit too hard. But the show will go on.
Enjoy yourself, bro. But we're going to see you on Saturday. We'll catch up Friday, but we'll see you at the show on Saturday.
For sure.
All right. All the best to everyone in their peak week this week. And hopefully we get to see some of you guys on the weekend. Come up and say hello to us.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Getting amongst it.
Yep. It's going to be awesome.
All right, guys. Enjoy. Thanks, guys.